This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has chaired an awards ceremony held in honor of the laureates of the baccalaureate and middle school exams at the People's Palace here in Algiers. Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held talks with the visiting Deputy Head of the UN Mission in Libya, Stephanie Khoury. The Ambassador of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic to Algiers, Abdelkader Taleb Omar, has stressed that the Sahrawi people would continue their struggle until they regain sovereignty over all their occupied territories. Algeria has expressed deep concern about the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Darfur, as well as the persistent violence between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support paramilitary forces. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Salmani.
Dear listeners, hello, I'm Majid Mila.
The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has chaired an awards ceremony held in honor of the laureates of baccalaureate and middle school exams at the People's Palace here in Algiers. This year, the national success rate reached 58.28% for the baccalaureate and 62.85% for the Middle East or the Middle Education Certificate. Education Minister Abdel Hakim Belabed has said that this year's results are promising for the future of the country.
The major attention he grants to the Algerian school constitutes good signs of a promising future for education and educators in Algeria, that he is determined to promote science and the education sector. There has been a remarkable improvement in school performance this year, confirmed by the national results of this session's exams, as the average success rate in the secondary school exam was put at 62.85%, an increase of 11%, while the success rate in lower secondary school increased to reach 73%. Regarding the baccalaureate results, the results improved by 68% and the success rate rose from 50.61% to 58.28%. Our nation's cadets had made excellent results, raising the success rate to 97.95%, as much as the excellent results achieved by the students with disabilities. All sectors of the state recorded a qualitative leap within a short period of time under his visionary leadership at the economic, industrial and social levels.
Let's note that the ceremony was attended by senior state officials and government members, as well as the families of the laureates.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has received here in Algiers the Deputy Head of the United Nations Mission in Libya, Stephanie Khoury, now on a visit to Algeria as part of consultation and coordination between Algeria and the United Nations on the developments of the situation in Libya. Mariam Bashi.
In a statement to the press, Mr. Attaf said that the meeting was an opportunity to take stock of the efforts and steps taken by the United Nations to make the political process move forward with a view to resolving the Libyan crisis. Mr. Attaf explained that the persistence of the Libyan crisis was due first and foremost to the increase in complexity of foreign interventions in the affairs of the brotherly country.
Algeria once again calls on all foreign parties not to interfere in Libya's internal affairs and to put an end to policies, practices and actions likely to sow division and deepen the gap between the children of the same country and the same nation.
In this context, the minister stressed that Algeria remains deeply convinced that putting an end to such interventions will have a major impact that will enable the Libyan brothers to overcome the current divisions and find a platform of consensus that enshrines the contribution of everyone to an inter-Libyan process. For the minister, the consensual platform must lead to the organization of free and fair elections through which the Libyan people will give legitimacy to those they see as the most competent and the most capable of representing them and defending their interests.
تحويل الاستحقاق الانتخابي
by avoiding to make the electoral event in Libya an end in itself, as the objective is broader and more inclusive. The success of this event depends on the progress to be made in the preparations, which must be fully completed. The second priority is the importance of safeguarding the ceasefire agreement in this country.
على تثبيته.
The UN official Stephanie Khouri, for her part, stressed that Algeria is playing a key role in supporting Libyan efforts to find a solution to the crisis.
نقاشنا كان عميق ومفيد جدا حول
Our discussion was very fruitful and deep about the crisis in Libya and the challenges in terms of divisions, security, economy, as well as the stability of the region as a whole, and not only in Libya and its repercussions on the region. Of course, Algeria has an important and essential role in supporting the Libyans' efforts to reach a solution, and I would like to thank His Excellency the Minister for supporting the UN efforts. The UN meeting also focused on issues the Minister had referred to in support of the interests of the Libyan people, with a view to achieving a united Libyan state without divisions.
That was the Deputy Head of the United Nations Support Mission in Libya, Stephanie Khouri.
The third session of the Algerian-Italy Strategic Dialogue on Bilateral Relations, Political Issues and Global Security has been held in Rome under the co-chairmanship of the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Lournes Magroman, and his Italian counterpart, Riccardo Guariglia. This session was an opportunity for the two parties to assess bilateral cooperation and its prospects in different sectors in light of the agreement adopted during the second session of this cooperation mechanism held last month in Algiers. It also constituted an important step for the preparation of the upcoming bilateral events, notably the 5th Algeria-Italy Summit. The two diplomats had an in-depth exchange on the state of Algerian-Italian relations and ways and means of strengthening them, as well as the current regional and international issues of common concern, notably the situation in Gaza, the issue of Western Sahara, the situation in the Sahel region, and Algeria-EU relations. Energy and Mines Minister Mohamed Al-Qab has received here in Algiers the Vice President of the multinational SLB company, former Schlumberger, Abdullah Mirad, to discuss cooperation and partnership opportunities in various fields. On this occasion, the two sides examined cooperation and partnership prospects in the field of hydrocarbons. They also examined opportunities for cooperation and partnership in the field of exploration and technological development of oil and gas fields, digital solutions, and modern technologies in the oil and gas industry in Algeria, in addition to training human resources. The two parties also discussed cooperation and investment opportunities in terms of reducing gas emissions and carbon footprint, as well as improving efficiency in the oil and gas industry and renewable energies, notably with regard to the development of hydrogen.
You're listening to Radio Algeria International. This is the English service. The ambassador of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic to Algiers, Abdelkader Talib Omar, has stressed that the Sahrawi people would continue their struggle until they regain sovereignty over all their occupied territories, assuring that Morocco's maneuvers to impose its occupation of Western Sahara were doomed to failure, as the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination was guaranteed by international law. The details with Mariam Barshi.
Addressing a forum organized by the Daily and Mujahid in collaboration with the Embassy of the Sahrawi Arab Republic and the National Institute for Global Strategy Studies, the Sahrawi representative Mr. Talib Omar recalled the latest developments in the Sahrawi cause, in particular the recent French position in favor of the so-called autonomy plan for Western Sahara, which he said wasn't new, as France has never ceased to support this plan by all means, including military. The ambassador recalled that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, stated in his last report that the Sahrawi question was a matter of decolonization and that its resolution should take place within the framework of the United Nations, which guarantees the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination.
France has not been followed by any party because the United Nations, in its latest report and the statement by the Secretary General's spokesman, have affirmed that the issue remains a matter of decolonization to be resolved within the framework of the United Nations. A report was recently published on the matter, and even the European Union declared that it had not changed its position and that it supported the solution within the framework of the United Nations and the implementation of its resolutions. This is a setback to the French position and to the Moroccan regime. The defenders of justice around the world remain firmly committed to this cause, as it is a flagrant violation. France has also shown its incoherence by supporting international law and the unchanged border of Ukraine while supporting occupation and expansion in Western Sahara. The contradiction has been revealed.
African and Latin American ambassadors and diplomats who attended the forum also reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and to the decolonization of the last occupied territory in Africa, reiterating their constant support for the Sahrawi people's struggle until they regain their freedom and independence. The ambassador of the Republic of Namibia, Dean of the Group of African Ambassadors in Algiers, Pandulina Kaino Singjenge, for her part condemned the French position supporting the Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara, stressing that it is a question of decolonization and that the Sahrawi people aspire to hold a referendum on self-determination.
Meanwhile, the mayor of the French town of Ivry-sur-Seine, Philippe Boissou, strongly condemned Paris' support for Morocco's so-called autonomy plan for Western Sahara, describing the decision as irresponsible, a political mistake, unworthy and undemocratic, as it was not approved by Parliament. For Philippe Boissou, President Macron's decision to support the so-called Moroccan autonomy plan for the Western Sahara illustrates once again the weakness of the president's commitment to peace and the freedom of peoples. According to the official, behind the political blunder lies above all economic interests that target the natural resources of the territory. The political bureau of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Russia, for its part, has condemned France's support for the autonomy plan within the context of Morocco's alleged sovereignty over Western Sahara, saying that this decision contradicts international diplomatic practice. Now, the UN Security Council is holding today an open briefing to discuss the humanitarian situation in Sudan, now witnessing a conflict between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces since April 2023, which has left nearly 19,000 dead and around 10 million displaced persons and refugees. The details in this report with Majid Mila here with me in the studio.
Indeed, Jamal, the director of the Operations and Advocacy Division of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, Eden Wosono, and the Deputy Executive Director of the World Food Programme for Workplace and Management, Stephen Omolo, are expected to make presentations. Today's meeting is likely to focus on the report of the Famine Review Committee of the Integrated Food Security Phase, which analyzes current and projected levels of food insecurity in the Zamzam camp for internally displaced persons located near El-Fashir, the Sudanese state of North Darfur. The document states that conditions of famine are present in the camp, which is home to around 500,000 people, stressing that the likelihood of famine persisting in the camp remains high, due in particular to the conflict extent restrictions and the expected poor harvest. Yesterday, during a United Nations Security Council meeting on Sudan and South Sudan, Algeria has stressed deep concern about the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Darfur, as well as the persisting violence between the two warring parties. Speaking before the Security Council, the representative of Algeria, Tawfiq Al-Aid Khudri, had this to say.
We must keep under scrutiny the role of external actors in fueling the conflict. This destructive role has to be closely monitored to identify the responsibilities and formulate the right response. We look forward to the update to be provided by the Secretary General on this matter in accordance with Resolution 2736. Furthermore, Algeria expresses its deep concern over the clashes between the warring parties and the continued deterioration of the humanitarian situation in Darfur, including food insecurity.
For his part, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, ICC, Karim Khan, has called on the international community not to ignore what is happening in Darfur, Sudan. Addressing the Security Council meeting, Khan had the following.
The last 6 months since I presented my last report to this council have been 6 months of misery, 6 months of torment, a terrible 6 months for the people of Darfur. And unfortunately, the last 6 months have seen a further deterioration. Many credible reports of rapes, crimes against and affecting children, persecution on a mass scale inflicted against the most vulnerable civilians in Sudan and certainly the most vulnerable people in Darfur. To those on the ground today in Darfur, and addressing both the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces, to those that are aiding and abetting them, that are encouraging them, that are funding them, that are supplying them with weapons, that are giving orders, that are gaining certain advantages, I want to be crystal clear that we are investigating. We're using our resources as effectively as we can to make sure that the events also since April of last year are subjected to the principle of international humanitarian law and the imperative that every human life must be seen to have equal value.
In a statement to reporters following the United Nations Security meeting, the permanent representatives of Switzerland at the ICC, co-focal points in the Security Council, has said that this conflict must not become the world's forgotten atrocity, adding that it is crucial to recognize the link between the pain and suffering inflicted to Darfur 20 years ago and the current situation.
We commend the efforts by the Prosecutor's Office to engage with affected communities in a challenging environment, and we welcome the continuing communication with SEOs, women's organizations, victims and witnesses outside of Sudan. We hear the repeated calls for justice, not just from those who witnessed and suffered from the crimes perpetrated 2 decades ago, but also the victims and survivors of the crimes allegedly committed since April 2023 in Darfur. This conflict must not become the world's forgotten atrocity. We renew our unwavering commitment to uphold, defend and promote the principles and values of the Rome Statute and to preserve its integrity, undeterred by any threats or measures against the court, its officials and those cooperating with it. In this regard, we continue to comply with our cooperation obligations and encourage all member states to fully support the court in carrying out its mandate of ensuring justice for the victims of the most serious crimes under international law.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture has called for an immediate end to the fighting and for the expansion of vital food and cash aid as well as emergency agricultural aid to reduce the spread of famine in Sudan.
Still with our African news, the Ugandan army spokesman Major Kikonko Tobaro has revealed that more than 2,000 refugees have arrived in Uganda in the last 3 days from the Democratic Republic of the Congo after the rebels of the March 23 movement seized the Congolese border town of Ishasha. Mr. Tabaro said that the humanitarian situation in the DRC border region was complicated by the arrival of more than 2,000 refugees fleeing M23 rebel squads in the last 72 hours. He added that the refugees were being taken to transit centers set up near the DRC border, stressing that 98 armed Congolese police officers were among the refugees who had arrived and were being treated in accordance with international rules on the subject, which include the handing over of weapons. Now to the Middle East. The Israeli army has pursued its airstrikes against Gaza, killing and wounding several people. According to the news agency Wafa, over 30 people were killed and over 60 others wounded in bombardments launched for the past 24 hours against various parts of the enclave. This brought to over 36,000 the number of people killed since Israel launched its operation on Gaza, nearly 10. Earlier, the Palestinian presidency spokesperson Nabila Bourdaina affirmed that the continued war of genocide, destruction and starvation waged by the Israeli occupying government in both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank had crossed the consensual lines. This is Radio Algeria International. Back to you, Majid.
Okay, Jamal. Bangladesh President Mohammed Shahabuddin has dissolved parliament following the students' protests, which prompted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to resign and flee to India. Protesters called for the dissolution of parliament, as had the main opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which is demanding elections within 3 months. Protests against a quota system for hiring in the government have led to the killing of at least 413 people across the country since early July. Meanwhile, the main police union in Bangladesh asked for forgiveness for shooting students. The union said the police officers were forced to open fire. It also announced a strike to ensure safety of officers. The Bangladeshi army chief, who is meeting with student leaders today, announced that an interim government would soon be formed. The Prime Minister Keir Starmer has vowed to impose swift criminal sanctions against anti-immigration protesters, stressing that a standing army would be deployed to support local riot forces. Asya Bakar.
The British Premier met with ministers and police chiefs in an emergency meeting aimed at finding a way to quell the unrest that has swept across various English cities the past week. Prime Minister Starmer vowed criminal sanctions against far-right riots in several cities that have seen widespread damage and nearly 400 arrests. The anti-immigration protests first broke out in Southport, where 3 young girls were killed in a knife attack after false rumors spread that the perpetrator was an asylum seeker. Mobs threw bricks and flares, attacked police, burned and looted shops, smashed the windows of cars and homes, and targeted at least 2 hotels housing asylum seekers in a number of cities at the weekend. Starmer said his government is focused on putting a halt to disorder. The National Police Chiefs Council in the UK said 378 people had so far been arrested and that others would be brought to justice.
The Algerian boxer Iman Khalif will fight against Thailand's Janjam Suwanfang for a place in the final. This bout will take place today against August 6th at 9:30 p.m. It will be broadcast live on national media. This is Radio Algeria International.
شلتين جبال وردة فتاة